For generations, the playbook for passing on wealth was built on one single, unwavering rule. But what if I told you that rule, the very foundation of estate planning, has been completely flipped on its head? Okay, let's dive into this, because the game has seriously, fundamentally changed. It's the million-dollar question, right? Or, well, the billion-dollar question. When you think about massive fortunes moving from one generation to the next, your mind immediately goes to taxes. And yeah, for very good reason. For the longest time, the answer was a single-minded obsession. The one goal was to avoid at all costs that huge 40% federal estate tax. The entire strategy, the whole game, was about getting assets out of your name and keeping them out so Uncle Sam couldn't take a massive slice of the pie when you passed away. But then along came the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBBA. In 2025, this law didn't just tweak the rules. No, it tore up the old playbook and threw it out the window. What used to be the primary goal for every estate planner is now, in so many cases, the very thing they're trying to avoid. And this has caused what we can only really call the Great Wealth Pivot. It's this massive, seismic shift in thinking and strategy and in how all of this is done. So what did this law do that was so revolutionary? Well, it made the highest state tax exemption permanent. We are talking about $15 million per person. That means a married couple can now pass on a full $30 million, completely free of any federal estate tax. The key takeaway here is that all of a sudden, the vast majority of estates, even really wealthy ones, are just no longer subject to that 40% tax at all. The main threat is gone. This quote right here from the source material just perfectly captures the new reality. That old war against the estate tax, for most people, it's pretty much over. The new battleground, the new obsession, it's all about income tax and this thing called basis management. Now, to understand this new game, you first have to know who's on the field. See, a trust isn't just a legal document or some kind of vault. It's really a relationship between three key roles. It's pretty simple when you break it down. You've got the grantor, that's the architect, the person who creates the trust and puts their assets into it. Then you have the trustee, who's the manager, legally in charge of following the rules. And finally, the beneficiary. That's who gets to enjoy the benefits from everything in the trust. Simple enough, right? Okay, now this is where it gets really, really interesting. We can actually put the old and new playbooks side by side to see just how dramatic this pivot has been. Just look at this contrast. The old playbook was all about one thing: exclusion. Get assets out of your estate to dodge that 40% bullet. But the new playbook? Its main goal is totally different. It's about minimizing the income tax your heirs will have to pay down the road. And the top tactic is something called a step-up in basis, which, and this is the crazy part, often means you want to get assets back into your estate at death. So what is this magic trick? Well, the step-up in basis is probably the most powerful tax break in the entire tax code. Seriously, let's say your grandfather bought a stock for $10, and when he dies, it's worth $1,000. If you inherit it, your new cost isn't $10. It gets stepped up to the full $1,000. All that growth, that $990 of capital gain, poof, gone. It's just completely erased for tax purposes. You could sell it the very next day and pay zero tax. So why has income tax suddenly become this new monster under the bed? Well, look at this. For you, an individual, you don't hit the top federal tax bracket until you're making over $600,000 a year. But a trust hits that exact same top bracket at just over $15,000. That's insane. It creates this huge pressure on trustees to get income out of the trust because if they don't, it gets taxed at these absolutely brutal rates. All this pressure has led to some incredibly sophisticated and, frankly, just fascinating power moves. These are the advanced strategies that really define the new playbook. Let's start with the star player, the Intentionally Defective Grantor Trust, or IGGT. The name kind of says it all. It's a trust that is, on purpose, broken or defective for income tax. This means that even though the assets are legally in the trust, for income tax, the IRS just pretends they aren't there and taxes all the income directly to the person who created it, the grantor. But for estate taxes, oh, it's very real. The assets are safely outside the estate. So how is this paradox even useful? Well, it creates this incredible move called the tax burn.
The grantor puts appreciating assets into the IGGT. As those assets grow and generate income, the grantor pays the tax on it from their own pocket. And here's the magic part. The IRS says that tax payment is not a gift, so it's a 100% tax-free way to pour more value into the trust, letting the assets inside compound at a supercharged rate for the beneficiaries.
But that is not the only trick up the IDGT sleeve. Not by a long shot. Another brilliant maneuver is something called the swap power. This is the ultimate basis management play. Imagine an IGDT holds that stock that went from $10 to $1,000. If the beneficiary gets it from the trust, they're stuck with that low $10 basis. But with a swap power, as the grantor nears the end of their life, they can literally swap $1,000 of cash into the trust and take the appreciated stock out. Now that stock is back in their personal estate. So when they pass away, the stock gets that magical step up in basis, and boom, the capital gain is wiped completely clean for the heirs. It's a perfectly legal, tax-erasing masterpiece.
So what does this all mean when you put it together? These complex strategies, they really point to a completely new philosophy about the future of wealth and how it's passed down.
The most crucial point is this. We've moved way beyond simple tax avoidance. The new game is tax arbitrage. It's about looking at the 40% estate tax on one side and the capital gains tax on the other and making a calculated choice about which one is the lesser of two evils for your family. And then you use these tools to strategically pick which tax you're going to end up paying. And for a final, really mind-bending example of this new world, you don't have to look any further than the Delaware tax trap. This was some obscure, complex rule that planners used to avoid like the plague because it could accidentally pull trust assets back into an estate and trigger that big estate tax. But today, you guessed it, planners are now intentionally springing the trap on purpose. They're using it as a tool to pull assets back into an estate for the specific reason of getting that valuable step up in basis. The trap has become the target. Which leaves us with a final, fascinating question. For a century, building a dynasty meant mastering the art of escaping the estate tax. But if the new frontier is mastering the incredible complexities of the income tax code, what does that mean for how fortunes will be built, managed, and passed on for the next 100 years? The playbook has been totally rewritten, and it feels like the game is just getting started.